Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, folks.
Hello.
Welcome to another Longevity Talk series hosted by Timeline. I'm joined here today by our Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Anurag Singh. Some of you may know him if you've joined some of these previous talks. Welcome to our topic today is why New Year's habits fail. So can't believe it's already January 21st.
True.
Apparently, the longevity uniform is a turtleneck.
It's cold here in Switzerland.
That's the uniform.
It's really cold.
A turtleneck.
Yeah.
But anyhow, thank you again. Thank you all for taking the time to join us. For those of you who pre-submitted questions, there's some great questions, so that's always very much appreciated. Just by way of introduction, for those of you who don't know him, Dr. Anurag Singh is the Chief Medical Officer here at Timeline. We're both based here in Switzerland, the Swiss Federal Technology Institute, EPFL, where the company was founded over 18 years ago, really with this vision of pioneering longevity. At the time, even mitochondria wasn't a word that you saw outside of biology textbooks, and so really becoming the mitochondrial longevity company. And so Dr. Singh not only he's obviously a medical doctor, he's an MD, but he also has a PhD. And he is, in my opinion, one of the leading physician researchers in the field of longevity. So we're very, very lucky to have him on our team.
Thank you.
And you've been on our team now for how many years?
12 years and counting.
12 years and counting. I'm still here and still excited to be here.
I think I've seen before longevity became a buzzword, we have been doing that, right? And finding ways to improve the health span and the journey as we age. And what has fascinated me as now I see the evolution and the big traction in the longevity field is that the word mitochondrial health used to be something that people are not familiar with. And now if you put top 20 longevity experts in the room, whether they're MDs or PhDs or MD PhDs, and you ask them what one or two fundamental areas where you think changing will really impact your health span and longevity, and they'll all say mitochondrial health, immune health. And so I think that's where a lot of the 12, 15, 18 years plus of research that we've done is now kind of converging on, and we really have the evidence to show that.
Yeah, and I mean, there was this seminal paper a couple of years ago by Guido Kromer's team around the hallmarks of aging. Some of you may have seen that. Maybe you want to just say a couple of words about, how many hallmarks are there, and which ones do you personally believe are the most promising ones and actionable ones and safe ones, of course.
Yeah, so about 12 years back, a group of top longevity researchers came together and they formed a framework of what we call the biological hallmarks of aging. And they defined these 9 key biological systems that just decline with aging. And the idea was that if you could intervene to reverse 1 or 2 of them, then you could perhaps have a better longevity. You can perhaps have better health span when you were in your 70s and 80s. And a lot of them are linked to poor nutrient sensing. So in your 60s and 70s, for example, you don't absorb the same nutrients as good as you were in your 20s and 30s. A lot of them are linked to epigenetics. Your environment, the sun, the stress influences your genetics, causes sort of these nicks, as they say, these scratches in your genetic material. But the main ones where, if you look at it, why do cells sense poor nutrition, or why do cells get stressed? They all kind of boil down to what I call the 2 parent hallmarks of aging. One is mitochondrial decline that happens with aging, because with the mitochondria, as you all know, are sort of the energy providers. When you get up from a chair or when you think about writing that email, it's the mitochondria that is providing you the fuel. And so mitochondria health is sort of the fundamental, I call it the mother of all hallmarks. And sort of on the other side, the other parent hallmark is this immune decline that happens very early. And as cells get stressed, they get inflamed, and that causes almost a tsunami of all these biological hallmarks. So I think if you could reverse, and there are interventions that exercise can impact both of these, watching what you eat can impact both of these, or even multiple hallmarks of aging. And the third is really addressing your cellular and mitochondrial health as sort of the foundation. And there are many targeted interventions there. And we've been studying one of them for a long, long time.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll get back into that in more detail in just a sec. We're January, almost at the end of January, believe it or not,
Yeah.
January 21st. So let's talk a little bit about the New Year's and habits. And have you renewed your gym membership yet?
Well, I'm usually very poor with gym memberships. I actually have a sort of a home gym that I always, you're right, you write these long lists of resolutions at the start of the year. I do it with my 12-year-old daughter, and she always is trying to match up if I have more or equal to her. Yeah. And I think that's probably one of the mistakes we make at the start, is we give ourselves too many goals at the start. But the way resolutions work is that it's something new, something novel, and something targeted that your mind or your brain is wired to start thinking. And it produces a neurotransmitter, a molecule in our body called dopamine, right? So you say, oh, I'm gonna go to the gym for 30 minutes or an hour every day.
Get a six-pack.
Get a six-pack, you got it. I'm gonna do breath work, or I'm gonna meditate for a few minutes every day. And you do that on a regular basis, let's say throughout January. And what happens is you get this increase in this neurotransmitter dopamine coming up. But that only works till your mind and your brain thinks that's novel. After it becomes repetitive, the dopamine levels go down and fatigue sets in. So what you need actually, and we were talking about mitochondria, but the brain's supply and the brain fatigue is setting in because of the mitochondria that need to sustain this motivation. So when you think you're losing
so you're saying, it's not so much a willpower problem, it's a power problem. It's an energy power
you got
problem.
it. I think it's not a motivation or a willpower problem. And that's how it's framed actually today, that, come February 1st, you stop, you don't even want to look at the road where the gym is, or, you're like, oh gosh, I didn't have a breakfast. I tried to keep my caloric intake low, and I can cheat one day. It's okay to cheat one day. It's not a willpower problem. It's really a power problem. You said it perfectly. And the power, this fuel supply, is coming from our mitochondria. And mitochondria are sort of enabling motivation. Mitochondria are enabling, to a certain extent, behavior at a neurological level, because they are so fundamental. And there is so much research now. You can actually look up this beautiful book from Chris Palmer called Brain Energy. All problems with brain and motivation, all the roads can come down to the problem with fuel supply and a fuel energy crisis in the brain. So I personally think it's just it's a mix of both. We can't just always say it's because of your mitochondria. I think it's you try to go too hard, you have too many goals, you stress your system. I personally have been going to the gym every day for the last 3 weeks for 1 hour. It adds up. It adds up, right, on your sleep. And then you say, okay, so I don't know how good I will be 9 days after, but it challenges the best, even those who know the biology. So don't blame yourself. It's just a matter of forming habits and sort of, rewiring your brain to keep doing small steps. I always say, don't try to do 100%, do 1% every day. That just adds up and builds a behavior.
Yeah. I can't remember who said it the other day, but I think it may have been Dr. Palmer. He was saying that if you want to, or someone else, but anyhow, if you want to motivate yourself for a run, something that sometimes helps people is actually sleeping in their running outfit for the next morning. So you go to bed in your running outfit, and that tiny little step is just that little nudge the next morning, which makes it a little bit easier. But shifting gears or building on what you were saying, a lot of people don't know this, but Timeline was actually started in a way as a brain company. Maybe you want to tell us a little bit about our history there, but also Professor Carmen Sandy, who's a scientific advisor based here at the Swiss Federal Technology Institute, one of the distinguished researchers in this field. Maybe you could tell us a little bit more about her work.
Yeah, so as Federico said, the company really started with this fundamental idea of bringing the biotech, the life science approach to deconstructing nutrition we all knew, and for many years we have known there are these superfoods, right? So there's the pomegranates, the berries, the nuts, sort of all in this Mediterranean diet that we knew had these immense health benefits. They did studies with centenarians living beyond their 100 years and found high levels of antioxidants and certain nutrients. But when they started doing these randomized clinical trials with pure pomegranate juice or a bowl of nuts and berries, the data was very variable. And so we got into this about, as Federico said, about 18 years back. We zeroed in on many of these superfoods, and one of them was pomegranate. And we found that actually it's what happens after you after you drink a glass of pomegranate juice or you eat a bowl of berries, your body actually needs the right gut microbiome, these sort of bacteria that have evolved with us, and they convert and release this postbiotic molecule called urolithin. And so that's how we got into and the early studies were done comparing pomegranate juice to urolithin, looking at brain metabolism. And what a lot of this research, as you nicely pointed out, happened at the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology, which, for those of you who are not familiar listening in, is probably the MIT of Europe, one of the top really elite research institutes. And the research was happening in two top neuroscience labs of Professor Patrick Abisher and Professor Carmen Sandy. And they saw these immense benefits in different models of cognitive decline. Professor Carmen Sandy. Preclinical models, albeit that's how most research starts, is in models and then progresses to human randomized placebo-controlled trials. What Professor Sandy saw was that a lot of the human behaviors, not the neurodegeneration like Alzheimer's, Parkinson, but sort of anxiety, stress responses were happening in a certain part of the brain where the density of mitochondria, depending on the density of mitochondria in that part of the brain, played a key role whether you'll be stressed or anxious or not. And so she has done these amazing studies in the brain where she shows, depending on if you have more or less mitochondria, your behavior could be either anxious or not anxious. And if you are anxious, she has shown that it is possible with nutritional interventions such as urolithin to reverse in preclinical models this sort of stress and anxiety-like behavior.
Yeah.
So
this just won a big prize for that work, right?
She actually was recognized as one of the biggest life science prizes, and she and I collaborate a lot, and we are actually thinking of how we can. I mean, we're doing a lot in the brain. So you said we started as a brain company, and then we found later on that it was really we were seeing these very quick muscle effects, and that's why we did all the 10 years of research on muscle health. But it could, I mean, if you think about it now, it could be the motivation is high, so you run more and you build your muscle. So we're trying to, research is always continuous.
Yeah. Okay. So on brain, what would you say is the next frontier for myopia?
I think the big frontier in longevity is really having the health span intervention, and exercise probably is the number one. Watching what you eat, things like intermittent fasting and caloric restriction. Problem is compliance, it's the motivation, right? We were talking about that.
Yeah.
I think a perfect health span intervention that can coexist in this universe with whatever you're doing needs to hit on skeletal muscle, needs to hit on your immune health, because we talked about these two being sort of linked to mitochondrial health. But the brain is very critical. That motivation, that reward that, I need to go to the gym declines. We were talking about this publication where dopamine levels decline with aging. And so in the field of today, there's a big prize, even 100 million plus, called the X Prize. And we are one of the top teams identified in this. The goal is over a period of 1 year to show that you can reverse by factor 5-10 years muscle health, immune health, and brain health. So what you were in your 50s, you kind of reversed it by a factor, and now you're in your 40s. And so I think that's the aspiration. And brain health is about mitochondria, and there are a lot of tools now existing. And we actually have launched one of the biggest randomized placebo-controlled trials, 650 subjects, where we are studying a novel brain supplement. So stay tuned. we'll talk about it.
Very exciting.
Yeah.
Very exciting. So just to close off the chapter on New Year's and New Year's resolutions, any final thoughts around, why January enthusiasm fades by February, and also this idea of habit stacking and identity-based change to make habits stick?
I think the science is still happening on that. Yes, habit stacking is a very important one. It's what I said. Don't give yourself way too many goals, because you will hit this sort of neuronal fatigue and stress response phenomena. Take fewer goals and simpler goals and sort of work towards more of a habit training and rewiring the brain to kind of be consistent, rather than that immediate gratification that, oh, I'm gonna get a six-pack in 3 weeks. I think that is probably not practical even.
Yeah.
So I think that's but do it with somebody. I think that we know people who live the longest,
good coach, a good mentor, a good friend.
People who live the longest do everything right, but they do one thing that doesn't get talked about. They have a very good social circle, right? So being in that sort of social ecosystem where you're with friends, challenging yourself with simple goals, I think that's the way to kind of go beyond January.
Yeah. Excellent. Cool. So let's change gears. We got a ton of questions that were pre-submitted. We also have some questions coming through on the live, which is great. Please feel free to submit more on the live. So a lot of questions around dosing. Maybe we start there, and let's take supplements and skincare separately. So on the supplement side, maybe you could just summarize the different dosing, the different formats that we have, and also the different sort of benefits that we've looked at, right?
Yeah. So we've done almost.
How many trials have we done in total? Just
if you count all the nutrition and skincare, we're counting 25 plus randomized clinical trials.
Is that a lot?
That's a lot. To give you an idea, companies do one trial or no trial, and they kind of start selling products. This is something we have felt very strongly since the start. We provide evidence-based products and only products that show us and evidence in randomized trials in different human populations. So from our evidence, we've studied 500 milligram and a gram of MitoPure in multiple trials. And when I say multiple trials, these are of different durations. So we've looked as early as 1 month. We've looked at 2 and 4 months. We've looked at different populations. So we've studied the healthiest 70, 80-year-olds possible. We talked about it before in one of the previous. The oldest participant in the trials has been an 89-year-old, very motivated lady who found that her gardening and her physical activity levels in gardening were improved as a sort of a side note. We have 20-year-old super athletes going into Olympics in our trials. So we have looked at a range of spectrum. And what we see is very consistent. What we see is at the 500 milligram and the 1 gram dose, we see mitophagy happening. Now, what is mitophagy? It's sort of this cleaning of this damaged zombie mitochondria out from your cells, right? These are that accumulate in different cells with aging. And so that's what MitoPure urolithinate does very well. It kind of recycles these damaged mitochondria out. This spectrum, how fast these happen, depends on the dosing. So when we look at, for example, a month, we see a dose-dependent effect on newer, healthier mitochondria in your skeletal muscles and your immune cells. We see about a 20% increase almost in the immune cells, for example, in the latest study, in terms of the amount of mitochondria. So mitophagy happens first, and then something called biogenesis, which means creating new mitochondria.
It's almost a 2-in-1.
It's almost
a lot of questions coming through around NAD, and do I need to take that as well, or how does that work?
I mean, you can always combine them. NAD, the way NAD works is it's a fundamental molecule needed by the mitochondria to sort of be more efficient at producing energy. So the power supply is better. But the power supply can only be better if the grid is not, is new and working. It cannot work if it's the damaged power grid, right? With the rusty wires and the electrical supply not moving around that efficiently. That's what MitoPure does that NAD will never do. So it kind of rewires the whole system. Now you have a cleaner power grid. And so anything you add on top, like NAD or creatine or CoQ10 will work more efficiently.
Yeah. But just back to dosing. So 500 milligrams,
Yeah.
a gram, 500 milligrams to simplify it for everyone is basically two pills or two gummies
Two
a day or
gummies,
one
something like
sachet.
that,
A gram would be twice that, so 4 pills a day, for example.
Mhm.
The 1 month you mentioned for immune, 2 months, 4 months.
So what we see is a similar effect on muscle strength over 4 months in our trials. What we see in addition to what at a gram dose over 500 milligram, for example, is it works faster, right? So you see the biogenesis happening earlier. You see additional benefits. So in our trials, we see at a whole body level lower inflammation. And in most of our trials, we measure inflammation with markers such as C-reactive protein, which is something your doctor will routinely do in your annual blood checkup. And so I think that the gram is hitting much faster.
Mhm.
So if you feel you're fatigued or you feel, having seen with your doctor, your blood work, you have some inflammation, the gram is the right dose. But if you're in your 50s, 60s, 70s, you're exercising, if you're doing all the right things, then 500 milligram is a very good maintenance dose. And that's what we actually recommend, because we think everybody already is very educated and doing the right thing. So the gram is more what I would when I see, if some example, somebody with some health issues and then
Or immune aging.
Or
Right?
immune
So
aging,
our
yeah.
immune study, so just to summarize, so on muscle,
yeah
500 milligrams or a gram.
Mhm.
On immune, it's the gram,
it's the gram.
but faster, right? So it's at a month.
Yes, you got it. So that's essentially, if you want faster, quicker benefits, then the gram is the right dose. If you want more sustained longer term, then
Yeah.
500 milligram is the right dose. If you're already doing everything well and you're a healthy Joe, 500 milligram is the dose to start with. If you feel fatigue, if you feel you're a little sore after exercises and want to get better, the gram is there. You can always go high and then kind of come to a maintenance dose.
Yeah. Okay, and then just practical recommendations. What time of day should I take this? Does it matter? What did we do in our clinical studies? Does it break a fast? Is it better consumed with food? Do I need to watch out for any counter, sort of any medications I'm already taking if I'm on statins, for example?
So we have done all that, and you can imagine over the 12 years, we've looked at older adults who are polymedicated. They're taking statins, they're on antihypertensives, blood thinners, name it. And so it is a very safe, it's a natural molecule, very important to mention. We've studied in even much higher doses and across species, and it's absolutely safe to take. So not a problem with issues with interaction with other medications, etc. And I think, does it break a fast? Depends on the form of how you're taking it. With the pills, it will not. The gummies are also sugar-free. It will not. But the powder, I'm not sure, may have some fruit from the fruit flavoring, some sort of caloric intake. So it may. So it depends on your lifestyle. And across the products, we've actually compared them. We've compared 2 pills to 2 soft gels to 2 gummies to 1 sachet of powder. They all give the same exposure, where, the way I test this is I go have a cohort of 12, 15 people taking just the powder. Then I have a cohort in a randomized way of 12, 15 people just taking the 2 soft gels, and then a similar cohort of individuals taking just the 2 gummies. And I'll take their blood and I'll look at the amount of absorption of urolithin A into the circulation. And then I'll look at the average across the population. And when it's the same or similar, that's when we know all these products are what I will call equivalent to giving you exposure to urolithin A.
So let's just peel the onion on that one, on the gummies. There were a lot of questions that came through prior. A lot of skepticism. I think rightly so, because a lot of gummies don't deliver the bioavailability or absorption that's on the label, unfortunately.
Yeah, and it's a big issue for creatine, especially, and all these molecules that degrade in gummies.
So let's talk a little bit about that. So, what's in our gummy, and what did the clinical study show versus the soft gel?
So most of the efficacy trials have been done with the soft gel. Okay. What the clinical trials we have done with the gummy is, as I was saying, comparing 2 soft gels, which is giving 500 milligram of MitoPure, to 2 gummies, which is also giving you 500 milligram of MitoPure, and comparing across 2 different groups of people, am I going to get the same exposure and blood levels of urolithin A? And they are identical. So we know the gummy will work like the soft gel. Okay. What time of the day you can take it probably anytime. Can I take it with the food? We have done those studies, whether you do it in an empty fasted state or with a heavy breakfast. This is a very robust molecule, urolithin A. It will absorb irrespective of whether or not with a meal. Timing of the day, in most of our studies, the intake is at first thing in the morning on an empty stomach, because you're overnight fasting, so you're probably already having some sort of fasting-induced autophagy levels higher. So, but it fits with whatever fits with your lifestyle, you should do. Yeah.
So a couple of questions coming through around creatine, statins also. So I guess maybe a couple of questions. So if people are already taking creatine, is it okay to also take MitoPure? Could it potentially be synergistic? And then similar question on statins.
So creatine, we haven't done the randomized clinical trial adding creatine with MitoPure, but what we have looked in is we have an amazing lab with amazing mitochondrial scientists, and they have put 1 and 1 together, asking, is this helping each other, or is this even more beneficial? And the answer, when we take human muscle cells and we put creatine will expand them and they look healthy. We put MitoPure, they'll also be very happy because their mitochondria are happy. And you put them together, it's really an augmented response. So it's almost as what I was saying, when you have the grid working better, when you have your power grid, your mitochondria. So in each muscle cell, you'll have 20,000 mitochondria. Now they're really in a grid. So they talk to each other. They exchange the ATP, which is the currency of energy, and that's how the energy transfer works in lightning speed with each other. And when you're taking something like creatine, it will just work better because now your sort of your foundational grid is working so much better.
Yeah. Okay. And then statins, just to close that point.
Well, statins, as I trained as a medical doctor long back, and statins were these wonder drugs, much like GLPs are touted now. They, of course, are life-saving drugs because they lower cholesterol and reduce the risk of cardiovascular disease. The problem with statins is they have a very common side effect, which is they kind of are stressors on mitochondria. And that causes things like muscle aches, muscle pain, and extreme cases, total muscle disintegration. So there are some side effects with statins. And of course, we haven't done the randomized clinical trials, but as a physician scientist, knowing that statins impair mitochondrial health to a certain extent, I think MitoPure can only be protective on that front. And those trials need to be done.
Okay. I want to shift gears to skin. How did we come to looking at skin? And if I'm already taking the supplement, why do I need to apply MitoPure topically? And how much MitoPure is in there? What trials have we run? Any trials? What are your thoughts on skin?
So skin started with a very simple idea, actually working with our co-founder, Chris Rinch, who's also a scientist, and just saying, well, the first things with longevity, you're taking MitoPure, muscles are better, you feel it in the gym, you feel it more, but what am I feeling? What am I seeing first thing when I wake up? Everybody sees these wrinkles and graying hair as a sign of aging. And so it started actually as a very naive question. Well, do our skin cells also have mitochondria that decline with age? And so we basically ordered a bunch, we started looking at skin cells from 20-year-olds, 40-year-olds, and 60-year-olds. And what shocked us was that, for many years, it was all about collagen degradation. But it was actually, if you look, the mitochondria were shot in these skin cells from the older participants, and they were super inflamed, these cells. So we said, this is where MitoPure works. It works by hitting mitochondrial sort of dysfunction and removing the bad damaged mitochondria and sort of dampening the inflammatory response. And when we started looking even at a molecular level, so we did many randomized clinical trials. And the way to do it is we put MitoPure in a cream at a concentration of 1% in sort of the solution of the cream, and applied it and I took skin biopsies. And then we can go molecular and look at what's happening at the biology of skin. And what we see actually is as we age, so these trials were done in mid-50 sort of population, you see the collagen degrading, right? So that's sort of collagen being the protein that gives you the elasticity of your skin. And as it degrades, you get these wrinkles, and your skin becomes sort of this wrinkly, dry skin with aging. What you need is the background of this are enzymes that degrade collagen. MitoPure was protective of that because it's hitting sort of, as I mentioned, this anti-inflammatory and mitochondrial. So the mechanism remained the same, Federico. And what we then started doing trials, longer trials up to 8 weeks, and we started seeing that the product was having, these topical products were having impacts on better hydration, lowering wrinkles, and really hitting sort of what people had not really approached the skincare field is going at a cellular level in skincare. So that's what I think. And to your question, how are they different between oral and topical? If you take oral MitoPure, it'll go into the blood and it'll get into sort of, the skin is a multi-layered organ. So you have what we call the epidermis, which is the first main layer, and then the dermis. So you'll nourish sort of the bottom layers. But to hit the top layers, the epidermal, you really need to go do a topical product. And so it's sort of this inside-out approach by combining MitoPure and oral and topical.
So the combination you think is worth a try?
I think it's definitely worth a try. And we're all actually even running trials in this area.
Super. Well, in case you didn't know, folks, we have minis now available on the skincare. So you know, if you'd like to buy a full size product, of course, you're more than welcome. But if you'd like to try it first, that totally makes sense. And so you can start with a small mini, see how you like it, and and see the effects. But yeah, I think it's interesting what you're saying. You know, it's almost like this idea that skin longevity is not cosmetic, right? It's really at that deeper biological.
And people forget skin is a very metabolic organ, right? I was trained as an immunologist, and a lot of the immune cells hang out in the skin, right? So that's why when we are kids and we were vaccinated or things like this, most of your immune cells are here. So that's where I feel skin is sort of a very key organ to health span that we have ignored for a long time.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's take the last few questions here from the live. So we've got a question that's just come through here. Have you found any issues arising out of using MitoPure with SSRIs like Prozac and NDRIs like Wellbutrin?
Tough one to answer because we haven't really studied that in particular. But I think there are trials where we had a few individuals on those sort of medications where we didn't see any interactions. But I think really to answer, are they additive to sort of standard drugs? The challenge there is also studying a supplement with a drug is that they're doing a clinical trial will classify it as a drug. So that's why we don't do these kind of studies, but we know a lot of folks in our trials, especially the older population that takes all these medicines, and it's not really a problem.
There is another question here just around mitochondria. Can mitochondria get damaged by ciprofloxacin?
Yes.
Has anyone used MitoPure to help with that side effect?
Known antibiotics, some class of antibiotics are known mitochondrial stressors, much like I was describing about statins and mitochondrial toxins. And ciprofloxacin, these floxes are especially well known to induce this sort of damaged mitochondria phenotype that results in this almost like chronic fatigue syndrome kind of presentation in a lot of these folks. We have not done the clinical trials, but I do know a lot of consumers who've written to me personally and claiming that it's helped them. again, this is anecdotal, so we would really need to do certain trials. But yeah, ciprofloxacin, and they're not the best drugs for antibiotics for your mitochondria.
Yeah. Does mitopure have any impact on the thyroid gland, good or bad, that we've seen?
We've done a lot of safety studies. In all the studies, we've looked at the hormones in preclinical and clinical studies. That's at least the phase 1, the first in human studies, where we looked at the thyroid hormones like T3, T4, and TSH, and we did not see any changes. So hard for me to say is it improving, but I can say that there's no sort of inverse impact on thyroid.
So just real quick on safety, maybe two minutes on safety. I mean, how safe do you think this is? The fact that it is a naturally occurring molecule, the fact that it's the only mitopure specifically is the only FDA GRAS form of urolithin A.
And the third would be just that over 2,000 people in different clinical trials across populations have taken it, and there are, I don't know, hundreds of thousands of people now. I mean, I'm in touch with the consumer number one for the I think you launched the product only after we studied it for 10 years, 5 years back, right? So I still know this lady
during
COVID, 21 or something around that, and we still interact. And she's been on it 5 years, and she's has a particular medical condition related to her muscle, where she has seen sustained sort of slow improvement over time. So I think the history of use already establishes it as a very safe molecule. And all the research, as you were saying, we have done in preclinical, clinical, and the FDA has looked. I think it's one of the safest molecules I've studied.
Well, we're at time, but I've got a last question for you. And folks, if we didn't get a chance to answer your questions online here, please do send those through to care@timeline.com, and we'll make sure we get back to you. Just on customers, what's your favorite anecdote or customer story?
Gosh, there's so many. There's so many. And, a lot of times people write to me because they know I'm a medical doctor, and they want me to learn from their experience and to contribute to because we study muscle, we study immune. I had recently, and maybe there's a recency bias on this one, I had a father who wrote to me about his son who had some sort of a mitochondrial issue with the eye, leading to impairment of vision, and he actually read in the news about our immune story and figured out if this is a supplement, there's no harm. It's out there, and they saw remarkable effects in sort of bringing partly the vision back, because it's an established mitochondrial problem. So that's
not obviously not a claim we can make.
And that's not obviously a claim we can make, but I still think the best one I've heard in terms of are people who are doing everything. There's still this cyclist I remember in their mid-50s, in the early days, wrote to both of us, who had a knee surgery and would do these 100-kilometer dirt bike races, and swore that he broke his record finishing the race even before in his 30s and 40s. So I think it's really that. It's really gives you this extra push, sustained push that I'm hearing. People are less sore, and you got to try it out. I mean, you may not feel it instantly because it's not a magic pill. You got to give it a few months for the biology. I mean, our mitochondria, we've been sedentary and not watching what we eat. Have been damaged almost all our adult lives. So you need to give it time. And a lot of times people say, well, I'm not feeling it. And I tell them, take a break. If you are not feeling it, see if you actually can see the difference. And then they actually say, well, my gym sessions have become much harder. And then they come back on the product. So there are all these great stories.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Singh, for your time. Thank you all for joining the live and for all your questions. Keep them coming. If these sessions are helpful, let us know. And, we'd be happy to continue them. Thank you for your trust in our science and obviously our loyalty. And last but not least, there is a discount for people who join. So please make sure you make the most of that. Thank you, folks. Take care.
You all.
Have a
Take
great
care.
great week.